You have no idea what it's like to work at a hospital like St. Helena Memorial. From the outside, it's all marble, mirrored glass, the smell of expensive cleaning products. Inside, it's the same chaos as anywhere else, except the chaos has a price tag. And whoever can't afford that price tag, well, whoever can't pay, just sits on the edge of a hallway, waiting for charity that never comes. I'm Emily, 8 years in the ER. I've seen it all. People faking pain to get a doctor's note, people arriving truly dying, and people who are just poor begging for help. And look, help for the poor at St. Helena Memorial is always the hardest to authorize. That morning, hell had a name. Ms. Patricia. She was a mama bear, the kind you find in the rough neighborhoods of Chicago. Tired face, but eyes of a lioness. Her son, little Sammy, had a serious infection, the kind that spreads fast like wildfire. The kid needed a specific cocktail of antibiotics, crazy expensive, the type of medication the hospital only releases if the patient has Platinum Plus insurance or is related to someone important. Ms. Patricia only had basic insurance, one of those social coverage plans that barely covered the consultation. Emily, please, for God's sake, talk to Dr. Morrison again. Sammy's getting worse. The fever won't break, she begged, holding my hand with desperate strength. I'd already tried. I swear I tried. I went to the supervision office, where Dr. Morrison, that woman with her nose in the air who looked like she'd swallowed a coat hanger, was drinking her gourmet coffee. Dr. Morrison, Sammy's situation is critical. He needs immunoglobulin C20 urgently. If we wait any longer, he could develop septicemia, I argued, trying to keep my voice professional but feeling the lump in my throat. Dr. Morrison didn't even look up from her spreadsheet. She had a Mont Blanc pen in her hand, the kind that costs a month of Ms. Patricia's salary. Nurse Emily, you know the rules. The protocol is clear. The patient's insurance doesn't cover C20. We need prior authorization from the carrier, and they've already denied it twice by phone. If she wants this medication, she'll have to pay the difference. That's $17,000 per dose, Emily. Does she have that amount? I took a deep breath, feeling my blood boil. Doctor, she barely has money for bus fare. It's a life. Doesn't the hospital have an emergency fund? Some charity reserve? St. Helena Memorial is a private hospital, Emily, not a charity. We can't break the bank for every patient who didn't plan financially. Put Sammy on the standard protocol, and if he gets worse, we'll transfer him to Cook County Hospital. Transfer. That was the death word. It means that when a case became too expensive or too complicated, they dumped the patient on the public system, usually too late. I went back to the waiting room with the weight of a ton on my shoulders. I looked at Ms. Patricia and felt ashamed of my uniform, ashamed of my badge. Patricia, I couldn't do it. They said you need to pay or transfer him to the county hospital, I said, my voice almost a whisper. Her tears weren't of despair. They were of anger mixed with resignation. She hugged her son, who was weak, and shook her head, defeated. I knew it, Emily. I knew it would be like this. We don't stand a chance, do we? The hospital is only for those with deep pockets. I stood there, powerless, while she tried calling relatives, trying to scrape together the impossible. My shift was almost over, but I couldn't leave. The image of that boy, suffering because of paperwork and $17,000, was burned into my retina. Stay calm, Patricia. I'll try to talk to Dr. Henderson before I leave. He's the shift director. Maybe he has a workaround, I promised, knowing it was a lie. Dr. Henderson was even colder than Dr. Morrison. I was about to go find him when the world came crashing down in the ER. It was around 3 p.m. The tense silence hanging over the reception was shattered by the deafening sound of sirens. It wasn't a regular ambulance. There were several, and they came accompanied by police motorcycle escorts. The ER door burst open with a crash. Attention, everyone! Priority level 1. Prepare the red room, notify the ICU, and call Dr. Harrison Whitmore now, shouted the head of internal security, who looked like he'd just run a marathon. Good Lord, Dr. Harrison Whitmore. For those who don't know, he's not just a doctor, he's the doctor. One of the most famous cardiovascular surgeons in the country, from an old money family, owner of a significant stake in St. Helena Memorial. When the Whitmore name was spoken, the entire administration trembled. Hallways that were empty filled up in seconds. Dr. Morrison, who 10 minutes ago was unbending, was now running in high heels, stumbling, to clear the way. The patient was brought in urgently. It was an elderly gentleman, pale, with shallow breathing. The paramedics were working like crazy. Severe respiratory failure, complex cardiac history. He needs immediate stabilization. While I was helping connect the monitors and prepare for intubation, I heard the conversation between Dr. Morrison and one of the transport team doctors. "Who is he anyway?" Morrison asked, visibly nervous. "It's Mr. William Whitmore," the doctor responded, his voice low with reverence. "Dr. Harrison's father." At that moment, all the bureaucracy, all the rigidity, all the protocol of St. Helena Memorial evaporated. The hospital that didn't have $17,000 to save a poor boy was now mobilizing a fortune in human resources and equipment in a matter of minutes. Dr. Harrison arrived like a hurricane, impeccable in his expensive suit, but with his face distorted by worry. "What's wrong with him? What are you doing?" he demanded, ignoring protocols about not entering the sterile area. "Dr. Whitmore, we're stabilizing him. He's in septic shock. We need to identify the source quickly," explained the attending physician, almost stuttering. I was there, at the edge of the gurney, holding Mr. Williams' IV access, watching the scene. The injustice was so glaring it physically hurt. The contrast between the silence and neglect given to Ms. Patricia and the luxury circus mounted for the boss's father was a punch to the gut. The medical team worked at full speed. Within half an hour, Mr. William was stabilized and transferred to the ICU in an isolation suite that looked like a luxury apartment. I was assigned to be his primary nurse, along with the elite team. Of course, someone with 8 years of experience who's efficient always ends up being scheduled for VIP cases. "Emily, you'll be responsible for collecting historical data. Bring all of Mr. Williams' old medical records. We need to understand his history," ordered Dr. Harrison, without even looking at me, focused on the cardiac monitor. I nodded, grabbed the file room key, and went down. That was the boring but crucial part, digging through years of medical history of a complex patient. The file room was cold and dusty. I found Mr. William Whitmore's thick folder. He was a long-time St. Helena patient, which meant years of hospitalizations, surgeries, and exams. I started flipping through, looking for patterns, allergies, recent procedures, and it was there, in the middle of that yellowed paperwork, that the first strange feeling hit me. The admission diagnosis was septic shock, probably caused by a resistant bacterial infection. The doctors were already discussing treatment, and Dr. Harrison would accept nothing less than the best. "We need immunoglobulin C20. 2 doses now. Cost doesn't matter. I'll sign the liability," he dictated on the phone to the pharmacist. My body went cold. Immunoglobulin C20. The same medication, the same expensive treatment, denied to Sammy. The irony was so bitter I could taste it. $17,000 per dose. The same medicine. One child denied, another authorized without a second thought. The only difference? The last name on the insurance card. I kept flipping through Mr. Williams' file, but my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking about Sammy, sweating with fever in that hard plastic chair, his mother desperately trying to borrow money she'd never be able to repay. I thought about the Hippocratic oath that every doctor in this hospital had taken. First, do no harm. But what about selective harm? What about the harm of indifference? I closed the file and went back upstairs. The ICU was in full operation. Dr. Harrison was there, overseeing every detail, every number on the monitor, every milliliter of medication, He was a caring son, that was undeniable. But he was also a man who benefited from a system that valued some lives more than others. Emily, how's the historical record coming? I need to know if my father has any previous allergies to the C20, he asked, his voice tense but controlled. No allergies documented, doctor. He's received it before, 3 years ago, with no adverse reactions, I informed him, my voice mechanical. Perfect. Administer the first dose. Monitor vitals every 5 minutes. I prepared the medication with the precision that years of training had given me. My hands were steady, but inside I was a storm. I watched the expensive liquid flow through the IV, entering Mr. Williams' bloodstream, and I thought about Sammy, who at that very moment was probably getting worse, without access to the same salvation. The shift dragged on. Mr. William responded well to treatment. His fever began to drop. His blood pressure stabilized. Dr. Harrison finally allowed himself to relax, sitting in the waiting room chair, his face showing relief. I finished my duties and was about to leave when I passed by the ER again. Ms. Patricia was still there. Sammy looked worse. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his breathing was labored. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't just go home, take a hot shower, and pretend that everything was normal. Something inside me broke. Maybe it was fatigue. Maybe it was accumulated anger. Or maybe it was just the certainty that if I didn't do something, Sammy would die, and I would carry that weight forever. I went back to the file room. I grabbed Mr. Williams' folder again. I sat on the floor, surrounded by decades of medical records, and started reading. Reading for real this time, looking for something, anything, that could help me. And then I found it. Buried in a file from 10 years ago, there was a transfusion record. Mr. William Whitmore had needed an emergency blood transfusion, but it wasn't just any blood. He had a rare blood type, AB negative with a specific antibody marker. The hospital blood bank didn't have it. The note said, "Emergency donor located. Anonymous donation. Procedure successful." I kept reading. There was a follow-up note, handwritten, which was unusual. Patient's family expressed desire to locate and thank the donor. Donor requested to remain anonymous. Confidential contact information stored in secure file. My heart started racing. I stood up and went to the secure file cabinet. These were the files that required special authorization to access, but I had the master key, one of the perks of being a senior ER nurse. I found the sealed envelope. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside was a simple note with a name and contact information. Emergency donor, August 15th, 2014. Name, Patricia Santos. Contact, phone number. Notes, patient expressed gratitude. Donor declined compensation, requested privacy. Patricia Santos, Ms. Patricia, Sammy's mother. The world stopped. I read and reread. It couldn't be a coincidence. Chicago's a big city, but not that big. I checked the birth date on the note. It matched. I checked the address. It was the same neighborhood Ms. Patricia mentioned. She had saved Mr. Williams' life 10 years ago. And now, the hospital owned by the family she saved was letting her son die. The anger I felt transformed into something else. Something colder. More calculated. I had a weapon now. A truth bomb that could blow up the hypocrisy of St. Helena Memorial. I made copies of the documents. I put everything back in its place. And then, I did something that could have cost me my career. I went straight to the ICU, where Dr. Harrison was still watching over his father. "Dr. Whitmore, I need to speak with you. Privately," I said, my voice firm. He looked at me, surprised by my tone. "Emily, now's not the time. It's about your father's life, and a debt that needs to be paid." That got his attention. He followed me to a private conference room. I closed the door and placed the copies on the table. "What is this?" he asked, suspicious. "This is your father's medical file from 10 years ago. The emergency transfusion that saved his life. Do you remember that?" His face showed recognition. "Yes, of course. My father nearly died. An anonymous donor saved him. We tried to find that person to thank them, but they refused to be identified. I found them, doctor. The donor. And you need to know who they are." I pushed the paper toward him. He read. His face went from confusion to shock to something I can only describe as horror. "Patricia Santos, that's the mother of the boy who's dying in your ER right now, doctor. The boy you're letting die because she can't pay for the same medication that's saving your father's life. The woman who saved your father didn't ask for anything in return. And now, your hospital is denying her son the same chance. You know that moment when I realized you might be feeling overwhelmed by this story? That maybe you're sitting there, thinking about all the injustices you've witnessed, or maybe you've experienced yourself. That's exactly why I share these stories. Because they're not just mine, they're ours. They're about all of us who've ever felt powerless in the face of a system that seems rigged. If this story is touching something deep inside you, I want you to know you're not alone in feeling this way. Subscribe to this channel so we can keep building this community together, where these truths matter, where every story counts. Hit that notification bell, because every week I bring you real stories that need to be heard. And please, leave a comment below. Tell me about a time when you fought for what was right, even when it seemed impossible. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Dr. Harrison stared at the paper like it was a death sentence. His hands trembled slightly. He sat down slowly, his face drained of color. Are you absolutely certain this is the same person?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I verified everything, doctor. Birth date, address, phone number. It's her. Ms. Patricia Santos saved your father's life with her blood. And now, 10 years later, her son is dying from the same type of infection your father has, needing the same treatment, and your hospital's protocols are denying him that treatment." He was silent for a long moment. I could see the gears turning in his head. The moral calculation, the legal implications, the PR nightmare, the simple human decency of it all colliding at once. "Why are you showing me this?" he finally asked. "Because you have a choice, doctor. You can pretend you never saw this. Let Sammy die, and live with that knowledge for the rest of your life. Or you can do what's right. You can pay the debt your family owes. Not with money. Ms. Patricia never asked for money. But with the one thing that actually matters. Saving her child's life. This is blackmail, Emily." "No, doctor. Blackmail would be me threatening to leak this to the press. Blackmail would be me posting this on social media with the headline, 'Billionaire's Hospital Lets Lifesaver's Son Die.' This isn't blackmail. This is me giving you the chance to be the man I hope you are, not the man this system is turning you into." His jaw clenched. I could see anger flashing in his eyes, but also something else. Shame, maybe. Recognition. If I authorize the C-20 for the Santos child, it opens a Pandora's box. Every denied treatment, every protocol exception, every patient without coverage will become a potential lawsuit, a precedent. Or, I interrupted, it becomes the moment St. Helena Memorial actually lives up to its mission statement that's engraved in marble in your lobby, where every life matters. Your choice, doctor. But make it fast, because Sammy doesn't have much time. I stood up to leave. I'd said what I needed to say. The rest was on him. "Wait," he called out. "If I do this, how do I explain it? To the board? To administration? To Dr. Morrison?" I turned back. "That's your problem to solve, doctor. You're one of the most respected surgeons in the country. You own part of this hospital. And your father is literally alive because of that woman downstairs. I think you'll figure it out." He looked at me for a long moment, then picked up his phone. "This stays between us, Emily. Do you understand? If word gets out about how I found out, if this becomes public—" "I understand perfectly, doctor. And here's my condition. Sammy gets the C20 within the next 30 minutes, gets transferred to the pediatric ICU, and receives the same level of care your father is receiving. That happens, and this file goes back in the archive and never sees daylight. Deal?" His eyes narrowed. This was a power play, and we both knew it. A nurse was dictating terms to a doctor who could end her career with a phone call, but we both also knew that I held the nuclear option, and he knew I was just crazy enough to use it if that boy died. "Deal," he responded without hesitation. "But this stays between us, you and me. You don't leak this information. If it leaks, I'll not only destroy your career, I'll make sure you never work in Illinois again." I felt the threat, but the relief of having won the first battle was greater. "Sammy needs to be stable by the end of my shift, doctor. If he is, the story dies here. If not, the truth goes public." 5 minutes later, Dr. Henderson, a portly, sweaty man wearing an Armani suit, came running, followed by Dr. Morrison, who looked like she'd been electrocuted. "Dr. Whitmore, what happened? Morrison said you demanded our presence here." Henderson was panting. Dr. Harrison didn't waste time on niceties. He was a man of action and was in crisis control mode. "Henderson, my father's situation is critical, but we have an even bigger emergency. Dr. Morrison." He looked at her with a coldness that made her shrink. "Do you remember patient Patricia Santos, whose son needed immunoglobulin C20 and you denied it?" Morrison swallowed hard. "Yes, doctor. Her insurance didn't cover—" "Shut up, Morrison. Her insurance doesn't cover the gratitude this institution owes her. Henderson, this woman, Patricia Santos, is the anonymous donor who saved my father's life 10 years ago. She has an extremely rare blood type and donated stem cells that kept my father alive. And the hospital, today, was letting her son die because of a $17,000 protocol." Dr. Henderson turned green. He wasn't stupid. He saw the PR disaster materializing right there. Dr. Harrison wasn't asking, he was ordering, and with a moral foundation that annihilated any bureaucratic argument. "I want Sammy Santos in the Red Room now, Dr. Henderson will sign the release for 2 doses of C20 immediately, using the reserve fund. Morrison, you will personally accompany Nurse Emily to the ER and ensure treatment begins in 10 minutes. If anything happens to that child, I hold you both responsible, and I guarantee you'll never work in this state again. Understood?" Dr. Morrison, the queen of protocol, was completely dismantled. She could only stammer out a, "Yes, Dr. Whitmore." "Emily," he turned to me, his expression serious, "supervise this, and keep me informed." I nodded. This was my moment of silent glory. I didn't need applause, just justice. "Come with me, Dr. Morrison. Let's go save Sammy," I said, without an ounce of respect in my voice. We went down to the ER like lightning. Morrison, who before walked with her nose in the air, was now almost running, stumbling in her own heels. I had to hold back my laughter. The hierarchy had just crumbled under the weight of a well-kept secret. We arrived at the reception, where Ms. Patricia was still sitting in a hard chair, hugging her weak son. She was trying to scrape together borrowed money to transfer the boy to Cook County Hospital. When Dr. Morrison approached, Patricia flinched, expecting another rejection. "Mrs. Santos, excuse me. I'm Dr. Morrison, shift supervisor," she said, and I noticed her voice was strangely soft, almost submissive. "Yes, doctor. I know my insurance—" "Don't worry about insurance, Mrs. Santos. There was a very serious communication error. St. Helena Memorial has just authorized the medication immunoglobulin C20, 2 doses. Sammy will be transferred to the Red Room immediately and will be treated by the best team. He is our highest priority, Morrison declared, and the phrase seemed to hurt her throat. Ms. Patricia blinked, confused. She looked at me, seeking confirmation. I smiled, a big smile of victory. It's true, Patricia. The hospital is doing the right thing, I confirmed. The tears that came this time weren't of anger or resignation, but of pure relief. She hugged Sammy, who opened a weak smile, feeling hope return. The change in treatment was instantaneous. Sammy, who was at the edge of the hallway, was taken to the Red Room in less than 5 minutes. I went along, of course, to ensure the C20 was administered correctly. While I prepared the medication, Dr. Morrison was beside me, monitoring the boy, looking like a luxury assistant. She avoided my gaze, but I felt her humiliation. She learned, the hardest way, that human life can't be measured only by bank balance. The first dose of C20 was injected. The relief was almost immediate. The fever started to break, and hours later, Sammy was stable enough to be transferred to a pediatric suite, not the common ward, but a private suite, courtesy of Dr. Harrison Whitmore. I returned to the ICU at the end of my shift. Mr. William was stable, sleeping, with the cardiac monitor in calm rhythm. Dr. Harrison was in the ICU waiting room, drinking coffee. He saw me and stood up, coming over to me. "How's Sammy?" he asked, his voice tired. "Stable, doctor. The C20 arrived in time. He's going to be fine." Dr. Harrison sighed, a weight lifting from his shoulders. "Thank you, Emily. If you hadn't shown me this, I never would have known. My father owes his life to that woman. Twice." I just looked at him. "You don't owe me anything, doctor, but you owe Ms. Patricia and Sammy. And you owe St. Helena Memorial the promise that from today forward, protocol won't be worth more than the life of someone who can't pay." He looked me in the eyes, and I saw that he really had understood the lesson. Or at least, the risk. "I'll ensure Sammy gets the best treatment until discharge. And as for Ms. Patricia, I'll find a way to compensate her. Financially and discreetly. Financial compensation is your business, doctor. My compensation is seeing Sammy healthy. That's all." I handed the folder back. He took it, and before walking away, he gave me a look that was no longer boss to employee, but accomplice to accomplice. "You're a dangerous nurse, Emily." "I'm a nurse who does my job, doctor, which is to save lives, regardless of zip code or bank account," I replied, with a slight smile. I left St. Helena Memorial that day, with the feeling of having won the battle of the century. The hospital would continue being a place of luxury and privileges, of course. One swallow doesn't make a summer, and one act of justice doesn't erase years of inequality. But I had opened a crack in the wall of hypocrisy. The following week, Dr. Morrison requested leave, and months later, was transferred to a smaller unit, far from the ER. Dr. Henderson became strangely accessible, and the protocol for releasing expensive medications for critical cases, even without full insurance coverage, mysteriously became more flexible. And Sammy? He recovered completely. Ms. Patricia, after everything, tried to give me a cake she'd made herself, but I refused, saying it was just my job. I never told anyone at the hospital how I turned the tables. Nobody needed to know the exact price of that act of justice, but every time I see a humble patient in the ER, I remember that day. I remember that sometimes the only weapon we have against bureaucracy and greed is the truth. And that, in the end, blood, whether rich or poor, has the same value. And that destiny loves playing tricks, ensuring the cycle of life and justice closes, even if forced by a stubborn nurse. If this story touched your heart in any way, know that you're not alone. We all carry our own battles, our fears, our doubts. But that's exactly why stories like this need to be told and heard. If you know someone who needs to hear this message of hope, share this video. Sometimes one story can be the light someone needs to keep going. And if you have your own story to tell, Leave it here in the comments. This space is ours, it's safe, and every word matters. I read every comment, and I know many of you also read and find strength in each other's experiences. I'll see you in the next video, with another story that will move your heart. Until then, take care of yourself, take care of those you love, and remember, life is always worth it. A warm hug, and until next time.